welcome once again. Still on the day of Pentecost, the day of the Holy Spirit. Today we are joined by Father Stephen Makagutu, the Order of the Franciscan Minor, if I am correct. Capuchins. And Father Stephen has a lot of insights for us as well today. And he's going to be explaining to us his name, full name of course, his title and what he does in Africa. Remember, this is our program Africa, the continent of hope, where we're showcasing what African Catholic leaders are doing in Africa. Welcome, Father Stephen Makagutu.
Thank you, Linda.
Please proceed.
As you have mentioned, my name is Father Stephen Makagutu of the Order of Friars Minor Capuchin, and I'm also the assistant to the Permanent Observer Mission of the Holy See to the UNEP and the UN Habitat, and in that position I do liaison between the Holy See and also the UNON, or that is the United Nations Office at Nairobi, matters to do with environment and human settlement. And I'm also a member of the GPIC, the Justice and Peace Integrity of Creation for the Capuchins in Africa, and also a volunteer with the Laudato Si Movement Africa.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And maybe just to ask, you mentioned JP, you mentioned Laudato Si Movement in Africa, and also you did mention being part of the Office of the Holy See. And sometimes back, or rather in the month of February, the African Union did, it unveiled the theme of the year being education, and it was based on educating an Africa fit for the 21st century. Now, my question to you, given those three institutions that you did mention, but of course observing the fact that the Holy See is a member state, how do you see, or rather how do you foresee strategies being implemented into the school curricula, especially when it comes to climate change and environmental matters?
During the preparation for COP28, the Holy See delegation was thinking about ways on how they can be part and parcel of the COP. And we were arguing that the Catholic Church, as a church, has many institutions of learning. And if we could bring into our schools of learning the issue of climate change, then we'll be able to have a bigger step ahead. Before the governments decide to make it part and parcel, if we could introduce it to our Catholic institutions from all levels, the primary, the high school, the universities and the colleges, to be able to integrate climate change as part of the courses that are being taught, be it examinable or unexaminable, but at least by trying to make the children, to make adults, to make people go to school, to be able to integrate their learning and to do simple things that will be able to change the environment, to have Laudato Si clubs in every Catholic institution, because there have been environmental clubs, but then maybe, and you remember those days as young people, we would have those small clubs in schools, but now with the Laudato Si club, we will be putting both the environment part and the spiritual part of it, because as you have been told that the scripture tells us that my people are perishing because of lack of knowledge and of God because of ignorance. So when we are able to integrate the issue of climate change, because there are also people who are still climate change deniers, who do not agree that climate change is in existence, and therefore we want to integrate this, that in our schools we are able to have seminars, we are able to have trainings for the people. Like the Laudato Si movement has trainings called Laudato Si Animators, that is not only for students, but anybody can be able to apply, join online, attend the classes to learn not only about Laudato Si, but to learn about the environment. And now we say we have climate crisis, not even climate change. We have seen in Kenya and in parts of Africa either drought or extreme floods, and which people need to learn about early warning systems and the rest, that people can be aware that this is what, and all this needs education, and not education only in the school setup, but education as a wide range, even in the society, to our mothers, to our grandmothers, to our fathers in the village, how they can be able to also be resilient to the climate change things, and also to how to adapt to the new systems that have been brought by climate change.
So you did mention some bit of the role that is played by these faith-based organizations, or rather the Catholic institutions in Africa. Now, let me take you a while back. We've had so many youth involvements, or rather youth institutions that are tied to faith-based organizations. And I know you also, aside from being a priest, you also fall into the bracket of the youth, right? Now, also being an observer, as a member state at the United Nations, how can the youth be effectively involved in matters environmental stewardship and also in the part of these policy processes?
Yes, if you read Laudato Si, Pope Francis talks about intergenerational dialogue, intergenerational unity, that the youths must be first and foremost thought of, because he says that we got to be making decisions that concern us on our behalf. Because also the youths are the implementers of these policies that we make, because most of the people who we sit with at the different meetings of the UNEP and the UN Habitat are of advanced ages. And if we don't give the youth an opportunity, then the policies will be made, but nobody will implement them. And therefore, youth stand a very big role. First, they're energetic. Second, most of the youth are educated. Most of the youth are innovative and creative, and they're able to design ways that will be able to try to find solutions to the climate change. And therefore, youths must be put in the forefront, not only to be seen and heard and also being just given a seat at the place, but also given a seat for decision making, not just a seat to be heard. Every time we go for the meetings, especially the UNEP and the rest, you find youth as a major group, you'll be given a chance at the last end to make a comment about maybe 10 things that have been discussed. Not every moment is a discussion, they're given a moment at the last. And therefore, whatever they say is sometimes it just goes without being put into consideration, because you're commenting over 10 things that have been discussed this morning or for the whole week. Secondly, the decisions must be supported by a country. If they don't get a country that supports the decisions or their opinions, then it goes to waste. And therefore, this must have a change, not only in the multilateral space, but also in the reality at hand. Because you go to a meeting and you're asked, you're a youth, who are you, what are you going to tell us? The youths must also be given that chance, because they are fighting for this generation. They are fighting for the land which is being degraded, that the people are going to inherit this land. It is said that, there's a saying that says that the land we live in is not our inheritance from our fathers, but it is borrowed from the youths and the next generation. And therefore they have a very big role to play in trying to give them that opportunity, not to be seen, but to be heard. And also, there are also youth organizations that are coming into place now for the environment and for all that. They need to be supported. That those small grassroots organizations that the youths are forming to advocate for a better climate, for a better world, should be supported by member states, should be supported by faith-based organizations. Because also, even in the church, they used to tell us the youth are the church of tomorrow. Tomorrow is here with us today. And therefore, we cannot continue waiting for tomorrow. It is us, because you go to the church, apart from our mothers, women, the majority of the people in church are youths. And if we still sideline them, then the church is also going to die. The church is going to die, and the church and not only the church, even the mosque, like our religious setups, teach us about the environment from the creation stories. So if we don't have the youth in the church, who is going to carry this idea of creation and stewardship to the world if they don't have that aspect of them being a religious people, being people who are also faith-based and also who are caring for the environment?
Now, you did mention something very clear, especially for those who are watching us online. If you are a young person, carrying stewardship to the global space. Now, maybe we do face a lot of challenges, and my question to you tied to that would be, what would be the intersection, or rather, what are your insights between the intersection between spirituality and ethics, especially where ethics is compromised, even in fact in these international spaces, and also in terms of environmental advocacy?
As I said in my introduction, that I work for the Holy See. And what we always try is to stand for ethics and morality, to be the moral mind or the ethical mind behind every discussion, because sometimes the discussions become too materialistic, that we don't think of the morality or of the ethics or the cultures of such things. And therefore, we who are faith-based, yes, as much as the Holy See is an observer state, but it's also an observer state that carries the minds of the Catholics all over the world, the minds of the Christians, of people of goodwill who believe in morality, who believe in ethics. The care of creation must put into place morality, and that is why we are told that we were made stewards of taking care. We were told that we have dominion over the creatures, not domination. And that calls us to be moral, people of good moral understanding, that we are able to know that whatever we have is for our use, not for destruction. That we only see things as much as benefit they can give us. That beyond that, they are useless to us. That I see this land, how can I be able, maybe if it's a field of oil, that I only see it as an oil reserve. I don't see it as land that can also be an arable land which can be used for farming, which can also be used to create a better place for sustainability. And therefore, morality reminds us that we as users of the creation, users of what God has created, when we apply technology, the technology must take into place the place of man, the place of humanity in the world. And that being a question of morality, it reminds us that now we are having the issue of the AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning and the rest. The church agrees and knows that civilization takes place. But then, how do we also put regulations that will be able to determine how the AI is used? Because if not, then they'll be abused by people who have no good wishes for other people, or because they are destructive in nature. So if no morality is put or no regulation is put on how they are being used, on how they are being implemented, then also countries that cannot be able to implement them will be on the suffering end. And therefore, there must be an capacity building, capacity development in countries, not only on regulating, but also on creating. Because what you find, most developing states find themselves, especially the African states, find themselves being given capacity building on how to regulate the risk coming with the technologies, but not how to themselves to create those technologies. And therefore, we must have a way that build capacity, and this capacity can only be built now through the youths, because there are people who have learned in these different sectors, and they still have a moment or time to learn, and therefore they can be built, and this building them, their capacity helps to create an Africa that is fit not only for this generation but generations to come, both morally, technologically, and culturally.
For that, and I like the fact that you also mentioned something about capacity building, which is also under learning, educating an Africa fit for the 21st century, and as you said, also for the future generation. So we don't need to focus on only this generation. Now, maybe on that you can also elaborate. How can member states, or rather even Catholic institutions, ensure a stable and equitable access to climate education resources and all that, given that Africa has some limitations, even when you look at DRC, when you look at Tanzania, when you look at Uganda, even in Kenya itself, when you look even at Ethiopia, we have a lot of political instability mostly, and we have an equitable sharing of resources. So how can we ensure that Catholic institutions and also member states where Catholics are many to have this equitable sharing of resources?
Yes, Pope Francis calls us in Laudato Si to remember that we're interconnected. That you might think that you are so high somewhere and it will not affect you. But with time, just as the floods in Kenya have shown us that nobody is immune to flood. It went to every part of the country, or especially every part of the city of Nairobi, telling us that it hits to everybody. When there's floods in part of there's drought, especially in Africa, and because most of the African parts are arid areas or semi-arid, the drought hits everybody. It does not care whether you are of upper class or lower class, and therefore knowledge should be open to people, that the people should have access to not only to the causes and effects, but also how to deal with it. Because many a times we are told the risks. Maybe we want to just transition, for example, but you're not going to tell us how we're going to transition. We continue preaching just transition, but how are we going to have it justly, maybe coming from firewood to gases? How are the people in the poverty-stricken places going to access the gases? And all this is what we are trying to work on, especially Catholic institutions. And you find Catholic institutions try to work with people in the grassroots, in the parishes. And if you read Laudato Si, the Laudato Si encyclical and its dissemination has talked about how it can be applied in the parishes, it can be applied in our homes. That is why the Laudato Si have called what Laudato Si Cycle. A cycle is a group of animators who meet together every month to talk about the environment, to talk about the gospel of creation. And in this, we continue to bring this information to everybody in the world. Because if we are 10 of us, we meet other 10 friends, that is 20. 20 meets another 20 is 40. So in that way, we are able to bring all this information to all the world. And as member states, we must be able to educate our people and also give them opportunities, because the governments in themselves cannot be able to solve every problem in society. They must need the people themselves to help them to come into solution of whatever they're trying to. Because mostly the people affected are the people in the peripheries, the people in the slums, in the marginalized areas, and these people need to have, for example, early warning. We remember we had the cyclone just recently in Malawi, but also Tanzania and the coastal Kenya. People at least were warned before. That we should also have these systems, like in the developed countries, where people are warned, but also our people to learn to be able to accept when they're given information. Because sometimes also there's a lot of fatalities due to people refusing to leave their land. But also, I also don't want to blame them so much, because you find many times that there are no resources set apart for them. When we move, where are we going to? How are we going to feed? What is going to happen to us? Because the government tells us, move to that place. So then what after that? So our government must put into systems, especially for managing crises, managing things like floods, managing things like droughts, managing environmental crises that are happening. Sometimes they come abruptly when people have not planned, like landslides. People are asleep, they find themselves, their houses are covered and all that. Therefore, there must be risk management in place by the governments and faith-based institutions, and also institutions like the Red Cross and the rest.
You could elaborate a bit more about the mitigation processes that communities and even or rather let me place it this way, how can the Catholic institutions, in collaboration with the government and in collaboration with the communities, mitigate climate action actually, or rather climate change? Because we know the community, you cannot say like there's climate change and then it's not affecting the communities. We also what happened recently with the floods. Yeah.
Yes, I think since time immemorial, there has been collaboration, not only with the Catholic Church, but faith-based organizations, even the Muslims and the government, in trying to mitigate climate change in different aspects. You find in many Catholic parishes, Christians, apart from being urged to plant trees in their homes, they also taught on how to have cleaner environment. In that way, they are able to mitigate the effects of the climate change. But most of all, that you find even during times of disaster, the Catholic Church has been in the forefront. The Caritas, the Catholic Relief Services, the Order of Malta, these Catholic institutions have been always in the forefront into trying to reach to the people who are affected, even without putting into place the government assistance. And therefore, if this collaboration are brought together between governments, not only in Kenya, but governments in Africa, because you find the Catholic institutions everywhere in the world have always been pro-people in good and bad times. And therefore, if then the government works with them together, then they're able to reach the people in all places. Because you can go to a place in the deepest rural village in any part of Africa and find either a mosque or a church, but sometimes you can't find no government institution like hospital or a school. So if government can work together with church-based institutions, then it will be able to reach these people any part of Africa, because the religions have been able to go to deeper ends of the world, be it in Africa, any religion that is there, be it Catholic, be it the Christians, be it mostly because in Africa you find Islam and Christianity. You find they have tried to reach all those ends. So if government can also leverage on all that has already been put into place by these religious institutions, then they are able to mitigate issues of climate change. Another thing is to bring education, as we are talking about education, that people should need to be trained. People need to be taught about the issues of climate change and how they're going to deal with it because without education, they'll not be able to know what we dealing with and how to deal with it. Secondly, we have small groups of women or youth in our societies. They're also supposed to be given maybe funds to be able to develop themselves. Maybe they're starting as trees, seed nursery planting for trees. Can we give them some funds that will help them to make it a better thing, so that even they can give our society the seedlings that they have grown to be able? And also the use of the things we have, the small rivers that we have, how do we use them? The use of organic planting or things that we can try to do away with the chemicals that we use in our farms and the rest, so that we use our farms sustainably. Having our own, people being taught about having our own kitchen gardens. You go to a home, they have no vegetables, they have nothing for their own. Everything is market dependent. Can we teach our people in Africa that they can be sustainable in their small farms, to have those small things like vegetables, onions, tomatoes for themselves, that not everything we have to run to the market. And in that way, then we mitigate slowly by slowly, not in a bigger way, but in a smaller way. And the small compact that put together will bring a bigger amount of mitigation compared to what government does. It comes once, does a project, and disappears. But if it is left in the hands of the people, and especially in the hands of faith-based organizations, they'll be smaller, but many small ones that make it bigger than the one which the government comes at once, does, and disappears.
Now, speaking about education, I also know, or rather we do understand as part of the Catholic chaplaincy to the African Union, that you'll be holding some training for the Spiritans across Africa regarding Laudato Si and Laudato Deum. Maybe you could a bit elaborate about the trainings that are going to be taking place.
Yes, I was requested by Father Emerick to not to just train, but to remind and also to walk with them the journey as their GPIC animators, because we have been called by the church. We used to have it as Justice, Peace and Justice and Peace Commission, but it was changed Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation. That we walk with them in this journey, so that we train their animators in every country and their collaborators, so that they can also go and train other people. So this training will put into place modules on the Catholic social teachings on environment and on peace, because justice and integrity of creation talks about not environment alone, but peace, because environment can also not be in place without peace. When people are fighting, they degrade the lands and all that. So we talk about peace and environment. We'll talk about Laudato Si. We'll talk about also the plight of workers, because it is humanity that takes care of creation. If humanity is not at peace, then the environment will not be at peace. Then we'll talk about Laudato Deum, which is the papal exhortation after the Laudato Si encyclical, and also their application into the world today, and how they can be implemented in our parishes, in our homes, in our small Christian community, in every aspect of our lives. So we are going to talk about these documents of the church, their relevance to us today, and their application in the world today. We for about 6 weeks of having not clerical classes, but having sessions every Monday for 6 weeks.
Now, thank you so much for those wonderful insights. Of course, I know you have enriched someone out there. And of course, if you're planning to join vocation, just understand it's not just priesthood alone. It's also a vocation to serve the people and serve the environment itself, because we are stewards of the creation. Now, maybe one last question for you, Father, would be, it seems Father is also an artist, because I did see some artwork somewhere, and I realized that you make also some rosaries made of beads.
Actually, this idea of making rosaries, I've been having it for a while, and we have been talking about empowering the youths. So I was working in a parish before I came to Nairobi, and I was thinking of starting a project for the youth that can make rosaries and sell, and in that way they can also develop themselves financially, economically, because the church should be able to develop people in all dimensions. So, but before I started the project, I was transferred and came to Nairobi to the office where I work now, and then that idea seemed to have died. Until recently, when I took a friend to do some shopping, and I found they were selling beads for making rosaries, or beads you can use to make any ornament. And when I decided to buy, and when I got home, at first I thought I'm going to give them to a friend who knows make rosaries to do it, but something told me you can also do it by yourself. And from that moment, I started making the rosaries. First of all, I got in love with the beads when I saw them, and then I came home, sat down, and in my first instance, I made it, and just as God said, after every day of creation, the God saw what He created and He loved it. I also loved what I created from the works of my hands. And since then, I've been doing this during my free time, and I'm ready to also make other people, especially the youths, to learn from it. Not only rosaries, they can make bracelets or anything that they can make to also make them empowered, because as much as we need knowledge, we also need money. I'm not going to be asking money from people, but the funds that we get from the things we do by the work of our hands will be able to empower the youths of Africa.
Thank you so much. Well, you heard it. Don't just sit at home. You have something that you can work on, and of course, it has some economical value tied to it, but don't think about money too much. So thank you so much for these insights, Father, that you have shared with us. Of course, today we were hosting Father Stephen Makagutu from the Office of the Holy See. Of course, he's also part of the JPIC, as he had mentioned before, and also part of Laudato Si movement in Africa. Thank you once again, and it has been a pleasure hosting you.
Welcome, and thank you to Linda.
Thank you so much. This has been our program, Africa, the continent of hope, and as you can see, our leaders, our Catholic leaders, are implementing a lot in Africa. Stay tuned, and of course, you can always share more. Thank you, and bye.